Hi, I'm Christopher Green, and I do digital design and software architecture at Internet 2. We're going to look at the difference between OESS and virtual networks, comparing some key points. In OESS today, this screen is referred to as a connection, and a connection contains multiple endpoints. Those endpoints contain peerings. That's how it's presented in the user interface. In Insight Console virtual networks, we're trying to take those same objects and rearrange them in a way that makes it easier to tell what is connected to what. So we're also changing the name of that middle piece, the connection, and we're changing it to virtual router, or if this were a layer 2 service, virtual switch. Everything you see here falls within Internet 2's domain, but we're hoping to make it easier to document what is outside of Internet 2's domain. In the case of this layer 3 example, what's at the other end of those peerings? Let's look at let's add some detail to this example. So in this particular example, we have a higher ed institution connecting to Internet 2 through a regional network. On the right, we have a second higher ed institution connecting to Internet 2 through a regional network. This is a layer 3 service, and both higher ed institutions peer with Internet 2. Insight Console refers to those peerings as the connections. Let's zoom out and see what it would look like to have multiple connections connecting to a virtual router. In this example, there are 4 connections associated with this one single virtual router. We're going to put this virtual router and all of its connections into a virtual network space. Virtual network spaces are new in Insight Console. Virtual network spaces contain virtual routers or virtual switches and their connections, and the spaces are used as grouping mechanisms, kind of like folders on a file system. You can put as many virtual routers or virtual switches in a virtual network space as you would like, although most of the time it will make sense to keep just 1 or 2 virtual routers or virtual switches in a virtual network space. Virtual network spaces have owners. In this case, our virtual network space is owned by the University of Arizona. Let's walk through the process of creating a new virtual network space and then building a virtual network within it. The first thing I'm going to do when creating a new virtual network is create an empty virtual network space. The space owner is set when creating the virtual network space. Now, I'm going to add a virtual router to that virtual network space. In this picture, I'm showing that the virtual net router falls within Internet 2's domain. I would like the University of Arizona to connect to this virtual router. The University of Arizona connects to Internet 2 through Sun Corridor, a regional network. We're going to set up a peering between the University of Arizona and Internet 2. That's in Insight Console terminology, we are creating a connection to Internet 2. Okay, it's time for the University of Arizona to invite a collaborator to the space. A space collaborator is another organization that has permission to manage all of the network resources within the space. The University of Arizona, in this example, just invited Duke University to collaborate on a virtual network. Duke University connects to Internet 2 through MCNC. Duke University is going to build their connection to Internet 2. Okay, at this point, we have a working virtual network that connects the University of Arizona to Duke University through Internet 2, using 2 connections and a virtual router. Let's talk about the interfaces and permissions required to be able to even create these connections in the first place. This endpoint is owned by MCNC. MCNC can use Insight Console to delegate VLAN ranges on that endpoint to other organizations, in this case, Duke University. MCNC has to do this in order to allow Duke University to provision a virtual network connection across that endpoint. Duke University can in turn subdelegate VLAN ranges to other organizations. So in this example on the right, Duke University has subdelegated VLAN ranges to 3 separate organizations, it looks like. This might be useful if you would like to have a VLAN range for each department or group at your institution, such as a research computing group. Just like in OESS, permissions to use VLANs still must be granted to organizations that want to provision virtual networks across those VLANs. Those permissions must be granted in advance of the virtual network being created. Let's see what it would look like to have multiple connections and multiple space collaborators, all possible in Insight Console. In this example, we've added 2 new connections, a Cloud Connect connection, which adds Microsoft Azure to this virtual network, and AWS, just for the sake of this example. We're also demonstrating here that there can be multiple space collaborators within a virtual network space. Each space collaborator has permission to manage all of the virtual network resources represented within the space.